Hello and welcome to yet another Podcast Pontifications with me, Evo Terra. If you're watching this live, this is not a... Oh, no, doesn't matter if you're watching it live or not. Doesn't really matter. What you're watching right now is not a podcast. This is a video where I talk about podcasting. Good news, though, you can get it as a podcast now. Podcastpontifications.com. That's not the important part. The important part is me looking to see what time it is. Great. Okay. Today on the show, I want to talk about the future of podcasting. There have been some recent moves, some of which I've spoken about on a prior episode, but I want to kind of drive them home right now. And here's the answer. It has historically been somewhat of a challenge to get your podcast listed everywhere. It's kind of like, think about book publishing, if you will. And I know I draw an analogy between podcasting and book publishing a lot, but the same thing holds true. If your book is available, let's say in Powell's bookstore in Seattle, which is a really cool bookstore, by the way, but if that's the only place your podcast is available, your book's not going to sell. I said podcast. If your book is available in Powell's and only Powell's, it's not going to sell very many copies. In order to get distribution that you need, your podcast has to be anywhere and everywhere someone might listen to podcasts, right? No surprise there. That's part of the syndication process. The challenge is that sometimes, you don't know where those are. If you're especially new podcasters and businesses getting involved with podcasting, they may not know all of the directories where it's important to list a show. That's one challenge. And the second challenge is navigating through those it just takes time. I mean, realistically, when I launch a new show for a new customer, for a new client of mine, and we have an RSS feed ready to go, I distribute it to a whole bunch of platforms, and it takes some time. It's hours, it's plural, to get the show syndicated around. A lot of people don't have time for that, and they're looking for shortcuts. So some of the services that are out there, I'll mention some by name, Anchor, Stitcher, and some hosting platforms as well, which I guess Anchor is a hosting platform, will automatically distribute your show to lots of different platforms. And that sounds like the right thing. That sounds like, oh my gosh, that's so easy. Why don't you just do it for me? Yeah, well, here's the challenge with that. Sometimes that site that you're going to list your podcast through, if it's submitting your stuff for you, your RSS feed, let's be specific, they may not be submitting your actual real live RSS feed. They might be utilizing their RSS feed. Even though you host your podcast with a professional hosting company like Libsyn, for example, or like Blueberry or Pinecast or the other ones that are out there. If you have someone else distribute your show for you, a couple of challenges with that. But that's a big offer. I mean, I don't think a lot of the people who are podcasters today who've gone through the problem understand what a pain in the butt it actually is, how much friction there is to get your show listed everywhere. So having another company offer to do it for you, that sounds awesome. Only it's not. Because again, the feed that they, whoever they are, submit for you may not actually be the actual real life feed. They could change the quality of your files. They could, in some cases, possibly inject their own branding in front, behind. So you kind of don't want to do that. And I was just reading an article that came out, I think yesterday, that talked about how Spotify and Google, two companies that it was really hard to get your podcast listed with, we all know have made some changes recently. Now it's easy. Anybody can submit a show to Spotify. Well, what a lot of people are finding is when they go to submit their show to Spotify, they get an email back from Spotify saying, we already have your show. And it was listed because of an aggregator company. Somebody else submitted your show for you. So congratulations, your show is in Spotify. People can listen. Bad news, you won't have any insight. You won't have any understanding of what the Spotify audience is doing. Your show might be up there with other stuff in it you didn't really want. And according to the article that I just read, it's kind of a nightmare to prove to Spotify that you are the actual real live owner of the feed. Google Podcast is facing that as well. Since they're going out crawling and listing, grabbing things, they're pulling stuff from lots of different places, lots of different companies that have created their own internal RSS feeds, sometimes external RSS feeds. And sorting through all that is somewhat of a challenge. And we're going to see it again with Apple. For the longest time with Apple, once you submitted your podcast there, it was stuck. You couldn't get it back. I mean, it's good news again. It's there, but can you see all of the cool metrics we get from Apple Podcasts if somebody else submitted it for you? Nope. Especially if they submitted it for you along with another 14,000 shows. You're not going to get access to that information. You need it on your own. Now, the good news is with Apple, there actually is a way to make a claim that says, I own this feed, and as long as you actually do own the feed, Apple will let you reset it. But what if the feed is not one that you really wanted, right? What if it's not your actual live feed that went in there? So many challenges out there. My message through all of this about choosing your own future, podcaster, is simply this. Don't take shortcuts. You can't afford to take shortcuts. Even though this medium, this industry, if you will, is already 15 years old, it's only 15 years old. And a lot of that, there wasn't a lot of structure outside of what a good RSS 2.0 spec looked like. There weren't a lot of really deep thoughts in how we make this stuff all accessible, especially when you think about the aggregators and the directories that are out there. And it's hard. It's friction, high-end friction to get there. So new people are often tempted to take the shortcut. This other company is offering to do things for me. Why don't I just do it? Well, because you may not have control over your own future. So the good news is, here's the good news. Let's say that you don't want to learn what 17 directories people like Evo submit to. By the way, when I submit shows on behalf of my clients, I create it for them. It's not going through me. Evo Terra, the human, is doing stuff, but Evo Terra, the email addresses and all that, are not doing it. We create something brand new, completely from scratch. Some of my clients say, why are we creating a brand new email address? We already have a lot of email. Yeah, well, this is why. I create brand new IDs. I create brand new email addresses so that it's very easy to turn it back over to the client if they want to log in and get stuff. So what I was saying is, if you find yourself in that situation, you've made a podcast and you want to distribute it out to the world, but you don't want to do all the work, the good news is you can hire people who will do it for you. Try not to use your aggregation service, especially if they say, just click one button and we'll automatically publish it everywhere. I would suggest not doing that. You can contact me. I'm very busy. You probably can't find me to do it, but there are others who will do it for you. Just make sure that if you have someone help you, that they're helping you, not them. Insist on new email address. Insist on a new ID everywhere, new logins, new everything. Nothing shared. Nothing shared, so that you are in control of your own future, podcaster. Now, if you made it this far in the video, this is the part where I normally say, thanks for listening, and I say goodbye. But before I go, I mention, again, this is now available as a podcast. Not as a video, but actually in audio. Yeah, podcastpontifications.com. And you can subscribe to the RSS feed and get all of these, of which this is number 55. There are 54 prior episodes that you can now consume wherever you feel like it. And if you do need help with anything to make sure that your podcast is future-proofed, contact me. I launch podcasts for professional service providers and businesses. That's what I do. Evo at podcastlaunch.pro reaches me. You can also check out more information about the services I do at podcastlaunch.pro. And hey, lots of ways to subscribe over at podcastpontifications.com. Thank you very much for watching. I shall return tomorrow at my regular time for another Podcast Pontifications. Cheers.